Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. I am joined, as always, by the Frenchener. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's just very broken up there, Britisher. And I'm also joined by Discordia. Good evening.
Good evening.
And at some point in the near future, once he's apparently finished doing away with the dog, was it you said, Discordia?
Well, it depends on the dog's behavior, I think.
We'll be joined by Uzalu, who has had a small comeback to YouTube, so it'll be nice to see him. Nice to see all the regulars in the chat, people like Dr. Martin Luther Pepe, Up Yours, Object of Hate.
Need to open the chat so I can see them and taunt them.
You want to taunt people? I knew I should never have given you a wrench. Are you back with us, Britisher?
Yes, I am.
No, marvelous. That's good stuff.
I was trying to work out, how cruel my revenge ought to be after you introduced me as the Frenchener.
Look, it's April Fool's Day. I understand it's
very
past 12
cruel.
p.m.
Yes,
Very
of course,
cool.
Mr.
I want to see this.
FBPE.
Mr. FBP. Oh my God! Can you imagine if I was FBPE? Like I come out as a secret FBPE. AA would have a field day. Be absolutely hilarious. So, what are we making of this whole debacle? I have to get the serious stuff out of the way first, guys. I'm so sorry, but what do we make of this whole debacle, which was last Friday? What do we make of Brexit Day that was never to happen?
Well, I'm kind of waiting for the new date. Like, how much do I need to kick off then?
Well, I would say the one thing to point out regarding the Brexit date that never happened was that, funnily enough, then also the porn license day never happened. Strange that.
That's true, yeah.
Because
apparently our government can't stick to a deadline.
Well, it was just strange that they had kind of placed the porn license date on the 1st of April. So just immediately after Brexit. So knowing full well that, the entire media furore would still be, going at full steam, so that, there would simply not be any column inches left for the porn license.
That is true. Maybe that was the plan.
Now that Brexit isn't happening on the 29th, funnily enough, they've changed their mind and don't want to face the flak.
It was actually cancelled like a week ago, but obviously that doesn't mean anything.
But then so too was the Brexit thing cancelled in advance.
It's true. The civil servants knew well in advance of us, I'm sure, as well. And I just go, well, aside from the fact that I really don't think that like the porn licensing thing would go particularly without clamour, but I don't think it would cause that much uproar as well, just because of the nature of the subject. But I just think no retailer in their right mind would stock the licenses because no one would buy them. Do you know what I mean? Like, what self-respecting retailer is going to say to all his working, like, because most of the guys who run the retail shops are all pretty working class themselves, and the idea that they're going to have to sell porn licenses to their mates, whilst funny initially, is just a bit sad,
Like some of the sort of online systems, like you didn't know how secure they were, so I think a lot of people might have preferred to just sort of go and get a physical thing, especially if it was a one-off, so you didn't have to give details to this random verification site.
When you say no one would go to buy them, that kind of reminds me of an interview I once saw when the BBC was in Russia, because of course the Russians have got these laws against the sort of sort of promotion of homosexuality and whatever. So of course the BBC is immediately with a bee in its bonnet trying to show how terrible this all is. And there was this wonderful interview with, I think it was the mayor of Sochi, the place where the Winter Olympics happened. And he was there sort of trying to sort of give us his best liberal spiel, if you know what I mean. Oh, I have absolutely nothing against homosexuals in particular. Nothing whatsoever. There just doesn't happen to be any here. And in that regard, I could almost sort of see, some person at Tory head office giving a similar interview to an American journalist. Oh, no, we have no problem with pornography whatsoever. But as you can see, we're not selling a single license. No one is interested.
No. Isn't there some funny thing as well where that it was initially meant to apply to all pornography and now it only applies to paid as well?
Yeah, probably because there's like porn all over Twitter. It used to be on
Tumblr,
on
yeah.
Tumblr. Like, how do you stop the free stuff?
In the same way that they've been remarkably inept at doing things like banning something like film streaming piracy sites. I just don't see how they could manage it.
I mean, it's, how shall we say, it's kind of wonderful ineptitude that if you ban the paid stuff, why would you allow the free stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, So
given the moral crusade around this and the whole reason they're supposedly bringing it in to protect children.
Yes. So I mean, in what way? In what way is the sort of corrupting value that they allege pornography has? In what way is that different if you pay for it?
Yes, I know, right? There's clearly all the filthy stuff is definitely behind a paywall, you see. And definitely nothing ever disgusting or filthy has ever managed to make its way onto the free sites.
Well, I mean, I still think that perhaps there might be a hell of a lot of confusion as to what actually might be included and what might not be included. So I would be very careful as to believe, at taking at face value what might be kind of going around as, oh, well, they're going to ban that, but not this. I say basically wait until it comes in and then seeing is believing, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it came to the filters, I mean, remember it was it's Call Me Dave Cameron, who introduced the filter system, whereby, every ISP had to have a filtering system and it had to be switched to on by default. So ever since Call Me Dave, you have to ask for the filter to be turned off. So, of course, people got interested in what are these filters filtering? Oh,
yeah.
National security, state secret, couldn't possibly tell, yada, 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 yada.
Of course. And then it came out.
But, I think sooner or later it was leaked or something like that. But anyway, someone managed to get hold of the information. And ridiculous stuff, the occult. And you go, excuse me, why is the occult being banned?
Edgar Allan Poe committed wrong think.
And it kind of shows that these kind of things always only go one way. And, therefore the solution is never to introduce this kind of stuff. And this time round, of course, who is in charge of what sort of stuff ought to be permitted? It's the BBFC, which is known to be completely incompetent and everlastingly bases its stuff on a whim. I mean, did you know, for example, that this goes back, I think, to the 1980s or something like that? Nunchucks were banned. You couldn't display nunchucks in a film that would get a British distribution.
Why?
Because they were dangerous. Children might start imitating it and hurt themselves. When those
bring on the guns.
when those nunchucks swirl around, they could hit themselves on the head. And you know what it was based on?
Yes, I remember watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Trio when I was young. Yes.
You know what actually it was based on? What scientific study? What? Because they're all experts.
Someone didn't like Bruce Lee. I don't know.
They all claim always that it's that it's very scientific and it's always based on studies and
experts say
it's always evidence based. Yes, it turned out that the head of the BBFC just simply had a personal opinion, and that was sufficient. And therefore, for something like 20 years or whatever, the stuff was banned. And I think it came to the fore when the BBFC pretty much, despite itself, had to allow the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Fantastic.
Basically, once that was a global hit, they simply had to say, well, we can't have one of them who is known to be the character with the nunchucks in the cartoon. We can't have him in the film not have nunchucks. Everybody will realize it.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
So they had to allow it, and it was then that it came to the fore as actually why it had been banned in the first place. So this is the BBFC. This is also the same. This is the same BBFC that gave. Was it Spider-Man? The first Spider-Man movie.
Oh yes, like a 15 rating or something.
It gave it. I think, was it a 12? I'm not sure.
No, well, the whole thing, the whole farce around it facilitated the creation of the 12A rating. But it was given a 15 initially in cinemas, which is why loads of the DVDs released as a 15, and it really irritated kids. So they created 12A.
Well, it wasn't so much irritated kids. I mean, you know what kids are like. They obviously they immediately went to DEF CON.
Oh yes, I remember.
Highest.
I'm going to show my age here, but I was a young lad at the time, under the age.
The ones who were irritated were the parents.
Well, yeah.
And what happened, and the people who then became irritated were the councils. Because, of course, the councils, they are actually the ones who have the authority as to what the age rating for films is in their cinemas.
Yes.
But they just happen always to go along with the BBFC.
Because it's easier, of course, yes.
Precisely. But here was the BBFC basically telling families they couldn't go and watch Spider-Man.
I see.
Well, that basically led to a mass revolt around the country in which all the councils, pretty much all of them, said, absolutely no way, you can take your kids.
I see.
And we've now put the outfit that is that competent, we've put them in charge of adjudicating on porn on the internet.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to deal with.
Sounds like a good idea.
I'm just trying to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we've really handed it to our best, but then again, we've got a track record in that regard. I mean, we've got Brexit, one of the greatest challenges since the Second World War, and we've handed it to Theresa May. So handing porn to the BBFC is in keeping in that record, I guess.
Indeed. Sorry, I'm just dealing with Undoom's connection issues, but in the meantime, a wizard has joined us. Good evening, Uzalu.
How about we just don't hand porn to anyone? Wouldn't that be a crazy notion?
Yeah, that would be sort of the extremist libertarian option.
Yeah, I'm a free speech extremist when it comes to pornography.
These things are always a balance, that there has to be compromise.
Yeah, compromise between treating people like adults and not.
Well,
never accuse our government of treating people like adults, usually. So
I wouldn't dare.
This is the thing I've been saying for decades by now, that the society as such is adult, and that the kids are in a way the trespassers. So they are the ones who are the special case. So we have to kind of create some kind of exceptional space for them or whatever, but the rest of society lives in an adult world.
The default state is adult, yes, and
Precisely.
The children are the responsibility of those adults.
And what we are seeing is instead the infantilization of society in order to account for the existence of children.
It's the socialist mindset. There are people who are lesser than you, therefore you have to suffer as they do. Let me just, I might not be able to stay very long, but let me just rattle off the salient arguments against this shit, right? One, it won't work. Kids will go somewhere else. There's all kinds of other places where they can go to get this, even if you don't include VPNs, but then you include VPNs, and they're not difficult to get. Not for kids so much, but kids will just go somewhere else. Which leads me on to two, it'll encourage illegal behavior. kids will just go to anywhere else, regardless. A quote from the article I'm reading these from: "When you hire a bouncer to crack down on kids drinking at the local pub, you don't get a sudden rise in homework. You get a surge in fake IDs and drinking in the park."
I like that.
I've got to credit Wired.co.uk for doing this article. I was going to formulate these arguments myself, but they literally just had them in a very nicely formulated way. So I'm just reading them off here. It's going to be a massive database of everyone's tastes in porn. So if you didn't want Theresa May to know what you tug your pee-pee to, too bad, mate. And I mean, you know, I'm not saying that they will, but could they use it to blackmail anyone in the country? Yep.
Probably. Yeah.
The company's doing. Oh, this one's fucking glorious, right? The company that's been entrusted with handling this is owned by the same company as owns some of the biggest porn sites.
Oh yeah, that was right. Yes, they're supposed
let's just give that a second, right? Give that thought a second, right? The UK government is now complicit in a porn monopoly.
Yeah.
Porn monopoly, Britain.
Oh, they have been in that regard. They've been involved in a porn monopoly for a long time now, because
since they banned British pornography creators from doing things like anything that pleases women.
No, it precedes that by a long mile, because you need if you want to run a sex shop, in order to kind of sell, once upon a time videos and now DVDs and whatever.
Oh, British, you're so naive, but go on.
Physically, if you want to sell that physically, then you basically have to pay a license, and that license goes into the thousands, the tens of thousands. So in that regard, the government has been in cahoots with guaranteeing a monopoly in that respect for ages. In a way, what we are seeing now is, in a way, a sort of is the logical conclusion of that. Because if you still insist that they pay their licenses, then you must guarantee them a market.
I think what you're talking about there is the same sort of barrier to entry regulations that people always accuse the EU of, which is also not a false accusation, which does discourage competition. It's the kind of thing that big corporations lobby for, because it's harder on small corporations than big ones. The thing is, this is different, because this isn't just introducing regulations against everyone, which are easier to follow for big companies. This is giving a specific big company control over access to every other company in the market.
Yes.
Basically communism.
Hello.
Hello there.
Speaking of communism.
How you doing?
Good evening, Undoomed. How you doing?
Yeah, just had some trouble getting in.
I see you've managed now to break out of that shop window I saw you trapped in one day.
Yes, it was very hard to breaking out of there.
No, I just thought it was remarkable. I just walked past and I thought, hang on a moment, that's Undoomed. The mannequin was just you.
There are so many mannequins of me all over the world. It's amazing.
It's free advertising.
So what are you talking about? I lost track when I was trying to get this audio to work.
We stopped talking about Brexit and started talking about the ban on pornography that's likely coming in, and now I'm going to read through the super chats to move us on. But just because otherwise,
how dare you change topic?
I know
This is not your show. Now that I'm here.
Now that you, this is the Undoomed and Oozloo show now.
Just the Oozloo show. Number 5, the porn risks censorship. And so that's the 5th point. The 6th point is there isn't even a good reason, which we already know. And that's the end. You can now move on. You have my permission.
So, Dr. Mark,
is it just me, or has Oozloo's wizard hat become all the more erect while he's been reading that?
You would know Britisher, I suppose. It's completely solid. So Dr. Martin Luther Pepe says,
if it isn't... I can't hear Not So Obvious at all. Is he speaking?
He is speaking, yes.
Can you hear? You can't hear me at all. Perhaps you have me muted.
Can you hear any of us?
That's not a bug, that's a feature.
I hear you, Oozloo, I hear you, the British, I hear Discordia. I can't
That's what you need.
But not me for the life.
So obvious.
This also happened on Sargon stream. I will never run a Hangout on Air Hangout again.
Well, this might be the slow death of Hangouts that we are witnessing here.
I mean, I can try leaving and then coming back. I don't know what's going to happen with that.
You can't. I don't. Well, actually, you might be able to if you're the host, but it might stop and not let you back in if you do that.
If I it's my stream. It can't let me. It can't stop
It's
me
fine.
from coming
We'll
back.
keep it warm.
It's just like
I should also point out that when Sargon did that, it didn't work. He had to restart his PC, and I have no idea why that fixed it. But if that is what fixed it, then you could try clearing your cookies. Clear your cookies, come back in.
I don't know.
Don't know how to do that.
We could I know how to clear my cookies. I'm just
Oh, do you?
I feel sorry for poor Undoomed right now, who is only getting half of this conversation. It's just
How
like
dare you say that about Undoomed?
perhaps someone
That's
suggests
not fair at all. I'm sure it's at
Yes,
least
I also must say that was a bit rude, not so obvious.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I can't believe you said that.
it's just disgusting.
I have no idea what's going on.
Obviously, I'm a filthy
That's the
person.
point.
If you could perhaps invite Mr. Undoomed to leave and rejoin the call, maybe that will work.
That didn't work with us on Sargon's Hangout either, but you could try.
I don't know.
Undoomed, not so obvious is suggesting that you tell your audience that you're a sissy boy with a 1-inch penis.
Well, I'm not saying.
That's his line.
Oh,
No, the suggestion was that perhaps Undoomed, if you leave and come back in again, it might work.
All right. Well, I'll just have 5.
Yep, you're being kicked out.
This is the entire reason for this is obviously to name drop Undoomed, but never have to interact with him for the entire stream. Stay wondering. Dr. Martin,
actually, he can interact with the rest of us, but he just doesn't want to interact with you.
It's just not me.
He might just be pretending, and I can understand.
In that regard, it's win-win, really, isn't it?
Yeah, ever since your channel's sort of been reborn, Oozaloo, you've become awfully sassy. It's just.
Are you saying that this is a new phenomenon? Have you do you not know me?
I preferred you when you were weak and breakable and quiet, but the
Then you really don't know me.
Which Oozaloo was that?
So I am going to go through the super chats whilst we try and fix everything here. So Dr. Martin Luther Pepe is donated 20 seconds. Says, if it isn't my favorite woman on YouTube, not so. Lil Aotearoa has donated $5 New Zealand and says, when Oozaloo comes on, everyone tell him his mic isn't working. He takes pride in his filters. Binary Surfer says, cucks get the helicopter too, specifically referring to the new CUK party. And Ragnok Ulfbert has donated $20. Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Says, would you all surrender to the porn license if it means a hard the triple exit? BBC setting your ass free. Well, Britisher, answer the man's question.
I am speechless.
So that's a yes. Britisher would be open to that. O'Keefe Ray is donated £2 and says they'll never take lesbian porn, so there's that. Ragnar Ulfbert for $2 says, Oozaloo, you need to fix your mic, bruh. You are crackling it a little bit, Oozaloo, but that's all.
Am I?
And
That's very strange.
Binary Surfer's donated £5 and says, I hate to break it to you guys, but if anyone's ever held a security clearance, they'll know this. The security services already know your porn history. Well, they know mine then, don't they? And Christian Chad has donated $5 and says, unpopular opinion. I think you have the wrong stream here, mate, but we'll continue with this. Conservative pessimism is incredibly unsexy. A great Trumpian week across the pond. P.S. I still adore our prophet, Peter Hitchens. And there we go. So I think we're all up to date there. Although, let me see whether or not we have any luck. I'm getting a message from Undoomed now, who's now, I assume, been blocked from entering the stream in its entirety.
Nice.
So there's something hinky going on. Now it's back to try again in a few minutes. So it's gonna try again. And then if he doesn't manage to make it back in,
I can only imagine that this is kind of, the signs of the slow death of Hangouts, because obviously it's now no longer really being supported.
Right. I presume it's entirely due to your presence here, Britisher, as someone tainted with the black spot that YouTube has given.
Yes, that could well be it.
It
could also be the fact that you jinxed it all by referring to me as the Frenchener when you started this particular stream.
Well, you're very good at Frenching, Britisher.
And
How on earth would you know?
He's on my shelf. He's a brain in a jar. But yes, leave that to people's imaginations. Definitely no one make a meme out of that. I really would not
Gentlemen,
appreciate that.
You know, I said that I would only be here for a short time, and so I needed to rattle off my spiel as quick as possible,
No.
and then abandon you like yesterday's. Well, never mind. Well, now is that time. A particular someone who most of the chat will be aware of once they see the streamer in their subscriptions has invited me onto a stream.
What? Who has invited you onto a stream?
Oh, I wouldn't want to tell you and make you all upset and jealous, Mark.
Who is it?
Can you guess?
V.
If it was
There are
V, do
loud
you think I would,
booming
one,
noises.
be doing it, and two, be gloating about it?
Good evening, Undoomed. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, that's a step
Marvelous.
forward. Yes.
Well,
Well,
I
then it's
suppose-
no longer any fun for me. I'll see you later.
we-
I'll give
take
Sargon
care
your
of
love,
it.
Mark.
Yeah, thanks. Say hi to Carl from me.
See you about. Take care.
Sargon is clearly counter streaming us, so we'll win in the end. Not to worry. What was I had things I wanted to talk about today.
V obviously felt that our presence online was simply overwhelming him, so he needed to call on Sargon to provide reinforcements in order to create some sort of counterbalance to the sheer magnificence of this particular stream.
Oh.
You've never described me as magnificent before, Britisher, but
No,
thank you
the
ever so
stream, not you.
much. What was I going to say? Let me see what I've got here. Some rubbish that I was there. Oh yes,
Weren't you doing super chats? Have you got through them yet?
we've got through the super chats, so that's fine. I was more thinking about. Oh yes, people are now proposing Common Market 2.0 for Britain in terms
Yeah,
of
those
Brexit.
are the four. That's one of the four propositions, isn't it? It's going through
But
with the whole Brexit thing. Yes.
I could either go down the Brexit route. I also have 10 April Fool's Day stories that look like pranks but aren't. At least 7 from my university joined Islamic State. And Elon Musk drops.
So
Rip
you'll be off
Harambe.
soon, will you?
Oh yes, that's obviously a personal tale. My name is clearly what's it? Zakaria Elogbani. That's my Syrian name.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I have.
So we can look forward to seeing you sort of run across Tower Bridge with bread knives taped to your hands or something like that.
I mean, you're expecting me to be that efficient? It's been a long time.
More like butter knives. That's all you'll be able to have a
Butter
license for.
Just because the police would take those away just quite happily. Yeah.
I can just sort of
One
see
butter
you,
knife, one potato peeler.
I can just see you running around with 2 butter knives strapped to your hands, and the police just scattering in panic before you, calling the SAS quick.
Oh dear. Are there any stories from across the pond that you've been pondering this week, Undoomed?
No, not really. I mean, it's just been the continuing talks of Mueller and all that shit. It's been really boring, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, compared to our kind of, world-ending Brexit. And,
Yeah, I mean, at least that's like kind of it's like watching a football game or something. You don't know who's going to win, and you just can't stop watching. But our politics right now is just the same old shit. So I'd rather much hear about.
So what you're
much
saying
rather hear
is-
about Brexit.
What you're saying is Trump hasn't tweeted in the last few hours.
I'm sure he has, but I don't really keep up with all that stuff.
Okay, so we'll dive into Brexit then. After I quickly mention that Dr. Martin Luther Pepe says, "Good, now I have Discordia all to myself." You have a fan.
I
Disco.
keep-
There you
I
go.
keep bumping into Dr. Martin Luther Pepe in like every chat that I'm in.
He somehow
Like,
manages.
you have to stop meeting like this.
He does somehow manage to make it into every single stream chat for the entire kind of.
Well, it is strange. It's either coincidence or it's stalking. You choose, Discordia.
He has good taste in chats.
We'll give him that.
Yeah.
Right, here we go. So this is Brexit. So this is another option we've been offered, apparently, because they're debating the 4 Brexit options, and this is one of them: Common Market 2.0. A group of Labour and Conservative MPs is promoting what they call Common Market 2.0. It may have also heard it referred to as Norway Plus. So they want to go back to the 70s and the 80s style economic community arrangement without any politics or direct involvement with the ECJ.
Is this something that the EU has agreed to? Or is
No,
this just something that the MPs are like, yeah, but we could have this?
Well,
yes,
the situation as it stands is this. The EU has offered 2 dates. So one is the 20th of May and the other is the 12th of April. So if we want, if we're leaving the EU by the 20th of May, then it is only if we agree to the deal that Theresa May agreed with the European Union. If we, if however we don't accept that, and so far we've voted it down every time it's come up in Parliament.
Yeah, but fourth time lucky. Come on.
If we, I mean, she is rumored to be seeking to bring it back again for a 4th time, so you might get your wish.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
So
Wouldn't surprise me.
If the date is to hold that is the 12th of April, then what we are supposed to do is to present the EU with an alternative plan, which, and this is the clincher, has the actual backing of Parliament. Because otherwise they get into the same old situation again as they did with Theresa May, where she agrees something with them, but then can't get her own Parliament to vote for it. So they are now basically saying to us, look, if you don't like the deal, what is it you actually want, which you yourself are prepared to back, and then we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically, the people pushing this one say it could be agreed with the EU quickly. There could be a majority for it. However, critics point out it still involves freedom of movement, something which was a red line which we said we wouldn't cross, making significant contributions to the EU budget, which is somewhat more disturbing, and following EU regulations without membership of the bodies that created them. So that's not ideal. Basically, it's all about just trade, but at the same time capitulating that we won't be involved in any of the political union stuff, but we'll still have to deal with the fallout of it.
We'll still have to take the rules.
Yes, and not to mention that even if we don't have to take the rules, right, because it says here, exempt from EU rules on justice and home affairs, right? But like, we all know that in the widening kind of grip of the EU's desire for unification amongst all these things, it's all going to just filter through anyway, because our Parliament will go, well, we don't have to do any extra work. The EU have already done it on this. We may as well harmonise, won't we?
Right.
Plus, you've also got the situation that, I think I've talked about this before with, Switzerland, where they thought they'd actually done everything that was required of them in order to have the agreement with the European Union, and where the European Union keeps coming back. And from what I've heard, from something I picked up on the BBC earlier today, I don't know if it's this option or if it's the other one, which is similar, which would just be the customs union, that effectively it would be a constant negotiation. So effectively, the negotiations as to what applies would constantly apply. There would be a sort of fluency of changes, if you know what I mean.
Isn't this just the worst possible solution?
One would think so, for a country that has said, let's leave, to basically say, okay, no, let's stay in some bits, but let's accept the rules that others may set for us. Yes,
Well,
you would actually think that would be about the worst. Yes.
So
the Parliament doesn't want to leave.
Here's something which I picked up, because I went to the Brexit Day march. If you've seen Sargon's speech video, you can see me manning one of the cameras. I'm not very flattering in it. Actually, don't see that video. But
all right, guys, come on, chat. Let's find this.
But basically, I got sent a picture by Tailed Feature. Like, I know this is you. I was like, thanks for that, mate. Anyway, and one of the things that I hadn't really clicked with was the constituency variance for the Brexit vote. So whilst on paper in numbers terms there was a sort of it was 52-48 or whatever for leave, on a constituency level it was almost 3-1, or it was just over 3-1 to leave, and all the Remain areas were in Scotland. Wales was just, I think, just over 50, and then England overwhelmingly voted to leave, basically, unless you lived in London or Brighton. So this weird thing where you've now got an even more bizarre take of the vote. Is it just a pure numbers thing, or could we also infer mandate from, like, a greater mandate from the constituency level, where you're going, actually we have like 280 408 constituencies which voted to leave, and there's obviously only 650 in the UK, so there's less Remain ones, so it's not quite as clear cut as 50-50 anyway. Do you know what I'm saying?
I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
But the MPs are completely defying
the
actual majority.
Yes, they're the complete opposite. They're 3-1 Remain overwhelming. They're 400.
So they're in complete they're in complete juxtaposition with the nation, and that's kind of the problem, that we've got a direct democracy, which is unusual for Britain. We don't tend to do referenda. So we did the referendum, we voted to leave, which it was a kind of an unusual exercise in direct democracy. But now our representative democracy, which is obviously Parliament, which is sovereign, they have the exact opposite view, and they simply can't bring themselves to effectively bring about that which they are charged with doing, which in a way they have charged themselves with doing, because they voted for a referendum, we held a referendum, and then at the last general election, both major parties, both the Conservatives and Labour, stood on a manifesto promising to implement Brexit.
Yeah.
And yet they're still all going against it.
Yeah. What do they gain by staying? I don't get it.
Well, a lot of it, right. So here's the biggest thing, which is personal kind of career prospects. Most European politicians, once they finish in their country of origin, will attempt to get a position in the European Parliament, because it's paid about 3 times what their usual local salary is. So I think it's only double for British.
So it's kind of a job security thing for them.
Sort of, but they also have, like, it's a pension thing as well. So like a UK politician is only entitled to the UK state pension, but once they, apart from any private pension pot, but they can also get a hold of a EU pension pot tax-free, which is usually over £1 million for in the entire pot for themselves. So there's a £1 million incentive for you right there. It also takes away a huge amount of legislative backwork for their civil servants and for their own offices, and allows them to defer blame if anything goes wrong with their office on EU regulations that they then are not responsible for having, because the directives from the EU, they had to implement them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I would say...
That's just so cowardly.
Yeah, I would say the financial incentive thing is perhaps a bit unfair. I really don't think that that's what they're, that's what they're angling for. I think those people who get jobs in Europe or whatever, tend to be, former prime ministers and stuff like that. So when it comes to your average backbencher in the British Parliament, I don't think he would have that to look forward to. When it comes to you're saying they can attribute blame to the other party, to basically of being able to say, oh well, it was Europe that did it, not us. that is very true. I think that is one of the things they don't want to
But
lose.
that's actually a thing that I've heard from European friends, that the European Union is the sort of dumping ground of politicians where they've fucked up, but they haven't fucked up enough for it to be a scandal. But they've made themselves impossible in some way, so they just shove them off to the European Union or something.
Well, as I say, that can be sort of high-ranking cabinet members or prime ministers or something like that. But it's unlikely to be your average, your average backbencher, one of the 650 in Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
The European Union as well has a tendency, because it works in directives. It doesn't work in laws in the same way. So what it says is, here's a directive, and now all of the member states, you should, unless you vetoed it, although they've been massively reduced anyway, you need to harmonize your laws to be in keeping with this directive. And so if a country messes up implementing laws which will implement that directive, then the EU can come back when it gets blamed and say, well, they didn't implement the directive as well as, say, another country which is doing better under it, or, that sort of thing. It's just a very bizarre...
I mean, if I can, sort of the chief reason I think we're seeing, the MPs, Parliament as such, resisting what the people want, is because I think they're kind of behind the curve. They simply haven't sort of accepted the change that has actually occurred. So Brexit and Trump were kind of part and parcel of the same phenomenon. And I think in the US, you will also have a great many politicians who still simply don't want to accept that what changes brought about Trump have actually happened. And they're still insisting on playing by the same playbook that was the case before.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah.
In that way, what has lifted these MPs to prominence is following the rules that have always been there, if you know what I mean. And what is clearly happening is the political sphere is changing dramatically in a way that none of us can actually foretell what the actual precise outcome is going to be in the end, if you know what I mean. And they are still insisting on playing it as they always have. I mean, I think I mentioned this recently on a video of mine in which I told of how, when Gorbachev was the head of the Soviet Union,
right.
and he was obviously bringing about change in the East. And at one point, he went to visit Eastern Germany. And obviously, Eastern Germany was one of the sort of most loyal satellites of the Soviets. And Erich Honecker, the leader, was a kind of, absolutely indoctrinated blockhead. And one knew, in a way, why Gorbachev was going to visit him. He was pretty much going to tell him, look, things have to change. And it was clear that when he was leaving, that Honecker had not agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And Gorbachev, when he was on the tarmac going towards his plane, there was apparently some international press had been allowed to be there, because obviously it was totally closed off back then. And the press kind of asked him, is there anything you have to say? I mean, what's happened in this meeting? And Gorbachev just said, those who refuse to change with history are changed by history, and then got on his plane. And in a way, what we are seeing is precisely that history is changing things. But here we have the MPs refusing to change with history. And I think that's why a lot of people are saying that upcoming elections might be absolute slaughter. I mean, we've already now seen Dominic Grieve, who is a prominent conservative, having been deselected as a future candidate by his own constituency, because they are not willing to accept how he has gone about his business in Parliament. And I think we will see more of that.
What did he do?
I think he was the one who brought about the situation whereby now Parliament is taking control from the government. So they are now having their own indicative votes and whatever, whereas usually it is the government, the executive, that prepares the program and proposes it to the House, and then they have to accept it or reject it. Whereas now Parliament is trying to make up its own proposals.
Right.
Which is why this whole thing has descended into such chaos. And if I'm not mistaken, Dominic Grieve was kind of one of the people at the outset of that. I think Oliver Letwin also had a role to play in a later proposal. But effectively, the Tory party constituency, so basically his local party has said, next time, come the next election, you're not going to be our candidate. Because I think there is a kind of almost revolt going on against the people who simply want to do business as usual,
Right.
because there just doesn't seem to be the insight by these politicians that, don't you realize something has changed? And playing this in the same way that you've always played it, and trying to cling to Europe when your entire nation has, in a way, told you, we want to break free. That just doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, they don't want to accept change. They'd rather say, "Oh, there was foul play, there was lies, Russia was involved."
People didn't know what they were voting for.
Yeah. How many options do you have today? Was it 4?
Today it's 4. Last time it was 8. Yeah.
8. Yeah. Holy shit.
And these are now the proposals that they themselves are proposing for themselves, and the Speaker of the House is deciding which of those proposals he wants to accept. So this time round, there is a vote in it which rejects a no-deal Brexit, which is a strange thing to put in, given that they've already had one of those votes once before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And last time round, when he chose which 8 he wanted to accept, he didn't want to accept a vote on whether to rule out a second referendum, because that's one of the things they're always pushing. Oh, let's have another vote. Let's ask the people again. Let's see if we can.
Speaking of which, if I just share my screen again, where are we gone? Here we are. So hopefully we won't have millions. Can you see this? This is live.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
On the side of Parliament, they have beamed whatever they decide, put it to the people, people's vote slogan on the side of Parliament right now. So.
Yes, because of course it's not a second referendum. A second referendum would be
as equally non-binding as
it would be to admit that one had lost the first referendum and one just wanted a second go. So instead, some clever PR company has obviously proposed to them, let's change the name of it and refer to it as a people's vote.
Yeah, it's infuriating. Just people didn't vote in the last one. You see,
No.
it was like the Welsh vote was entirely sheep. The English vote was entirely fish and chips.
And
Be careful what you say next.
And the Scottish vote was entirely Mars bars. Yeah, it was. There we go.
That could have been worse.
Mars bars.
That could have been worse. A lot worse.
Yeah.
Also, hello.
Also, hello. Welcome, Tailed Feature. Do you know Undoomed Tailed Feature?
Yes, I do.
There we go.
We've had the delight of speaking maybe about 2 years ago, so I don't think you'll remember me. But
so what you're saying is you have crossed swords before.
Oh, why would you say that in light of the new pornography laws, Britisher? I mean, really.
Don't cross the streams.
So Steve S in chat saying there's actually 8 on the order paper.
Oh, there is. So again,
A is unilateral right of exit from the backstop. The second is no deal in the absence of a withdrawal agreement. C is a customs union. D is common market 2.0. And E so far is confirmatory public vote, so another referendum. F is a public vote to prevent no deal. So just exclusively on no deal.
Also a public vote. So that would be a referendum to exclude no deal.
Yep, and
but that would mean that the other option would have to be to have a no deal.
Yeah, and the other option is no, it wouldn't be that way. It would be like, do you want to have no deal taken off the list of options that we debate in Parliament? And it's like yes or no. So that's about it.
Oh.
Another option is apparently just flat out parliamentary supremacy. And the final one is EFTA and EEA. So that's the European Economic Area and European. What's the FTA? Just remind me, British. It's the
Path. Free trade area.
Free trade. The free. Just for goodness sake, like EFTA.
Free trade
I
area.
was just waiting
Fanny's
for them
tits and
to.
arse.
Free
I'm
Trade
just waiting for them
Association.
to say yes on something. Like, yeah, we'll do this.
Well,
And
the
the
thing
EU
is-
to be like, we weren't offering that. No.
The thing is, I don't think it's even sure. I don't think it's even certain whether the results of these things mean anything, because the last time they had the 8 things to vote on, everybody in the cabinet, I'm not sure whether it was also the ministers, abstained. But basically,
Right.
the government position was, we will not take a position.
I thought that sort of thing only happened when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez passed a motion.
Precisely. So,
Yeah.
so in that regard, what you were seeing was merely the backbenchers themselves having it out with each other. But of course, if you then throw the numbers of the actual government folk back into the pot, that will completely skew the results.
Yeah.
So, to a certain extent, even if something manages to get a very narrow majority, it may be purely academic.
Can we just get the Americans in and just
I
annex
can't
us?
believe no one has a hard Brexit option though.
No,
Well,
I can
this
quite
is just
believe it.
it. I mean, this is the one thing that the parliamentarians wish to avoid. I mean, if you would ask the public, a great many of the public would just say, well, let's just get out.
Yeah.
But that
No,
would be the
you
public,
guys-
that's not the politicians.
You guys must be getting sick and tired of it. Just, get it
it's just
over with.
like at the moment, my fondest hope is that we kind of flop out due to bureaucratic incompetence, and the EU just says enough. You know, if you want to sort a deal out, you can do it on your own time and sort of do
if they
that.
get to the 12th of April and they still haven't got anything on which they can agree, then there are 2 chances. There are two options. Either the European Union is going to say, well, why don't you stay with us for another 5 years? They will kick it into the very long grass.
Right.
And they'll basically say, so in that case, we've then got a lot of time to talk about this. And, obviously with the whole plan in mind of let's make sure they can never leave in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
let's hope
other
they forget
option-
about it.
And the other option could be of them just simply saying, look, this far and no further, because, I mean, let's face it, you simply can't agree on anything. So that could then mean leaving with hard Brexit. So technically, as long as they can't make up their minds, hard Brexit looms over them, because it would be very difficult for any government who stood on a manifesto of we will see to it that we leave the European Union to then agree with the European Union to stay in for a few more years.
Yeah.
And then, as the next act of the government, this is where the unwitting comedy becomes even better. As the next act of the government would be then to call for elections to the European Parliament.
Yep, it's ridiculous.
Because those elections are due. So if we would then be expected to remain members of the European Union, we would obviously have to have representation. So this would be the government that said, we will see that we leave the European Union, then agreeing to stay in for a long time, and then calling for elections to the European Parliament.
Do you know what the silly thing is? Like, again, this is just the ridiculousness of British politics. It's another indicative vote.
Yes.
Like it's not even like there's nothing substantial. It's just kind of like how you're feeling.
Yes.
Well, how would you vote if this were potentially offered to you?
This all boils down to they're trying to get some indication as to what Parliament would be willing to back, because so far all we've ever seen is what Parliament is rejecting.
Yep.
So that's why they've now effectively taken it out of the hands of the government, and they've said, okay, we will try and come up with ideas of our own. well, we've seen how successful that has been so far. So they've had 8 votes and they've rejected all of them.
People are
Yes,
asking for option J just for the lols.
So yes, I mean, I think in American terms, this is the equivalent of the House of Congress. Basically, this is the House of Representatives kind of getting together, trying to dream up some options, rather than the White House actually having to prepare a law, send it to Congress, and having them vote on it. So this is the
So
House
now,
of Representatives now kind of brainstorming ideas.
Yeah. So before, when you had 1 cook, now you have 600 cooks.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
And they are all presenting their ideas as to why don't we have a vote on this, and then it falls to the speaker to basically choose to whittle them down to 8 and say, okay, these are the 8 we're going to vote on. Which of course then means that there are 642 MPs who are irate because their idea wasn't chosen.
Is that a hard rule? There has to be 8 at the most?
I don't know. That just seems to be the rule by which they're flying. I mean, at the moment they're making it up.
How many options? How many options can we make up to distract people from the fact that there's no WTO Brexit on the
640 odd?
Yeah, it's just like the funniest thing. Like whenever I bring up the concept of Brexit to like any Remainer in there, I'm like, do you trust our current government? No, of course not. They're all horrible people. Now, how do you feel if those people were in charge of not 1 country, but 28 of them, and they were completely unaccountable to you?
Well, I mean, there is, in all fairness, there is also another irony that one has to point out, because that joke rubs both ways. You know, by leaving the European Union, we want to regain more sovereignty for our parliament. These are the people we're looking to see being able to make more decisions.
Yeah, but you can vote those guys out.
Well, true, yes, but as you can see, the party system brings about these geniuses in our chamber.
We can we can vote them out until Commissar Corbyn decrees that he needs special powers. Special powers to enable Brexit, and the very object of our freedom becomes the chains of our enslavement. The Grand Duke of Middlesex has chimed in for you, Britisher, and says, we need a people's vote to get the Britisher to grow a grand moustache. What do you think?
We need a royal decree.
Royal decree.
Yeah.
Queen must do it. They like Undoomed. How do you feel if British's avatar grew a mustache? Do you think it would make him more palatable?
Distinguished.
Well, it would have to be a porn stash.
It would have to be a full porn.
So it would have to be the full handlebar, would it?
Does that mean we'd need a license to see Britisher?
I mean, we already need a license to see Britisher, don't we? It's just... Dr. Martin Luther Pepe saying, don't forget about me. I don't know. I haven't forgotten about you, have I? Someone removed the message. If you put it in chat, Dr. Martin Luther Pepe, I will say it for you. But your super chat's disappeared because one of my moderators went rogue during this chat and decided to ban a load of people, and I've just had to remove them and try and...
No one will suspect me of being that moderator, because no one will ascribe to me the technical ability to do such a thing.
That is true.
Oh, yes. So I have here...
Boomer confirmed.
Dr. Martin Luther Pepe is saying they should have beamed porn onto the Parliament. That's what...
Actually, yes, there would have been a certain amount of humour in that, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
Brexit porn.
That would have been a great idea.
And if they couldn't object to that being beamed onto Parliament, how would they object to the other?
Yeah. And you could ask for their license.
You could yes, if you've got a license. Oh dear. Apparently there's a documentary coming out called Brexit Storm. And I don't know whether or not this has been a storm. It's been more of like, a really muggy day that just won't end. That's basically.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those muggy days that kind of induces headaches, isn't it? And just doesn't want to stop.
I've just never. Never done this. Oh dear. Let's. I'll tell you what. Let's move away from Brexit. We've been talking about Brexit for it seems like forever.
Well, months, really.
Years.
So-
Fucking Jesus.
I have here for your enjoyment 10 April Fool's Day stories that look like pranks or aren't for my dwindling audience who are definitely going to leave to watch Sargon with this news.
They wouldn't dare.
But it's April Fool's Day again, and the hunt is once again on to identify the news stories being planted by imaginative editors with the sole purpose of bamboozling their readership. Elon Musk has released a rap song. It's briefly stepped away from his work in space exploration, and he released a track called Rip Harambe. A reference to the Cincinnati Zoo gorilla.
Undoomed, you were lying to us. You were saying there wasn't anything going on over there.
Clearly, I haven't been paying attention.
And I have got to check this one out. And yes,
I usually avoid media on April Fool's Day. So
he's called himself young Musk for today. And
That sounds like a porn star's name, right?
I can't play it because obviously it's going to get copy striked. But it's just like this song about this gorilla, and it's pure. Yes, what the fuck is this going on here?
Elon Musk for the win.
I tell you, he continues to entertain.
Yeah,
continually continues to entertain. So there's that one. And this is in more politics. A comedian,
the chap in the Ukraine. Yes, I've heard about
who played the character of the president on television.
Yes,
has received a 30% share of the vote, with the current leader Petro Poroshenko second on 17.8%. And it's just like, what? Why? So he's got no political experience. He's an actor, a comedian, no less, who played the president of Ukraine on TV and decided that he was going to enter the presidential elections in Ukraine, and he's winning.
Yes, I believe he played a kind of earnest teacher who kind of, really wants to do the right thing.
Right.
So kind of the non-corrupt straight Joe, if you know what I mean. And obviously that seems to have made an impression on the electorate. So now they're actually voting for him.
That's easy when it's all scripted.
And then when you're talking again on a kind of regional basis, the Green is the actor.
It reminds me of what happened in India some years ago, because you remember how it was always the Congress Party, Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi and whatever. They kind of had that country sewn up, and it was sort of many years later that finally the BJP finally managed to kind of secure a win, but it truly took them decades. And the one thing that swung it for them was they actually managed to corner all the actors for a certain series. So on Indian television, for the first time ever, they had broadcast the story of the Indian gods. So what did the BJP do? They signed up all the actors who had played the gods. They won in a landslide.
So Mr. Zelensky here from Ukraine is aiming to turn. He has a satirical TV show called Servant of the People, in which an ordinary citizen becomes president after fighting corruption, and he's making it reality.
Is this what's going to happen to Stargon? Yeah,
fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I like that. People are saying that everyone's going to accuse him of being a paid actor now.
But doesn't it, in a way, show that people are now truly willing to vote for anyone who isn't a politician?
Yeah, I think so. He hasn't done any campaigning. He's done no rallies, and he's given very few interviews. He has no strong political views apart from a wish to be new and different. He's just using social media, which is apparently appealing to the younger voters.
Perfect millennial.
And so the only thing he's got a problem with is his relationship with Igor Kolomoisky, who's apparently an oligarch over in the Ukraine. So it's just there we go. He insists he's no puppet of the oligarchs. Oh dear, which is different to, of course, Petro Poroshenko, the chocolate magnate, who won after Viktor Yanukovych was toppled. I don't know whether he won. I mean, he was installed. But yes, I can imagine that the Ukrainian people were kind of a bit irritated, shall we say, with the way their entire political system has been in the last few years. But yes, so this is not an April Fool's joke. This actually happened. There we go.
So it's basically the equivalent of voting in President Bartlett.
Yes.
From the West Wing or something.
Or we decide that Stephen Fry is going to make an excellent PM over here, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans,
or whoever played the PM in the thick of it.
Oh, yes.
I don't think you ever see the PM, though, do you? In the thick of it.
I don't know. I've never actually seen... I've only ever seen parts of the series and sort of thought I didn't like it.
Why did you reference it, British?
What was it? Wasn't House of Cards a British series from the beginning?
Yes, it was. Yes. Early 90s.
Get that
guy. He played the chief whip, didn't he? Who basically he is the one who needs to ensure that everybody votes the right way, and of course he then uses it to kind of manipulate it for his own advantages. And you kind of wonder to what extent that actually has happened in the whip's office, if you know what I mean.
Indeed.
Because if you really are the chap who knows all the, who has the book with all the dirty secrets of all the members of Parliament, we really want you to back the government on this, or we will release this to the press. Somebody who has all that to then be able to use that for his own purposes. One could see that happening, couldn't one? Particularly back then, when we hear now that there might have been all manner of sex scandals and whatever going on back then.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh dear. JS says he was a chocolate magnet. What will they think of next? Thanks for that. In other news, mosquito bites are apparently repelled by Skrillex.
Most things are repelled by Skrillex.
That's what I was hoping to hear, yes. But apparently his music, more so than him, is something which really messes with mosquitoes' brains, and they hate it, so it repels mosquitoes. There we go.
I think I'd rather be bitten by a mosquito and die of AIDS or malaria or whatever it is.
Then listen to, what was it, Nice Sprites and something or other. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, and Scary Monsters.
Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites.
Wow.
No, that's going back some, isn't it? Goodness me. Nigerian Agriculture Minister Udu Ogbe has claimed that Nigerians are using their mobile phones to import pizza from London on British Airways flights. Mr. Ogbe is trying to claim that Nigeria relies too much on foreign imports and has sparked ridicule on Twitter after making the claim. Where one user joked, "Dear British Airways, how come you didn't tell us you run pizza delivery service to Nigeria? Is there an app for this?" Funnily enough, the BBC has been unable to find any evidence to back up the minister's claim. So yeah, there's that.
I wish it was true.
Fish slime could help the development of new antibiotics, apparently. So they've been swabbing fish to get their mucus, and apparently we're all going to be ingesting fish mucus antibiotics to help.
Scientists get all the good jobs, don't they?
I was going to say, just deep fat fry that slime, and we'll have it in Scotland, no problem.
Absolutely, you'll eat anything, won't you? Some more stuff. Oh yes, that Japan has a new emperor coming this week, and they've created a gold dusted burger that's worth £670 per bite, or something like that. It weighs 3 kilograms. So there you go.
Yeah, they've also announced a new era, haven't they?
Oh yes, it's a key era or something. I have no idea. And I'm going to ignore these next couple because they're boring. But the last one is: a singing nun is to compete in the Italian version of the television show Strictly Come Dancing. Sister Cristina Scutia, who lives in a convent in Milan, shot to fame after she won The Voice in 2014, releasing 2 albums, and my personal favourite, covering a video of Madonna's 1984 hit, Like a Virgin.
Aha.
Well, she can say it with conviction.
Yeah.
Or can she? Who knows?
Or can she?
Oh, dear.
Well, that all depends on whether she has ever met Silvio Berlusconi or not.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah.
You always got to bring it back to politics, don't you?
No
Sick-
one gets away from
sick
him.
Or Joe
Sick-
Biden.
Or creepy Biden. Oh, my goodness. Like, you've been watching This Week in Stupid, haven't you, Tailed?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Speaking of...
I can't hear tailed. So it's still some fuck up with the hangout.
I love that you just like, doesn't matter. There's always one person you just can't hear.
It's just my accent, probably.
No,
What the hell is going on?
everyone responds to Tailed Feature, like humor. Oh, that's the best joke of the evening, and it's just like, no, not for you, Undoomed. You don't deserve this joke.
No, I guess it's like your ban is starting to ban us U.S. citizens. We can't even hear you.
It started in Scotland, obviously, and it's working its way down.
Like a
Yeah,
disease.
what it is you'll more than likely have to go to the British Embassy and pay a license to be able to hear us. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe it's a Scottish embassy then.
Well, we have one in Canada, apparently.
What?
Yeah, there's
Sorry,
like
how?
there is
What?
there is a Scottish government office in Canada.
Oh, and you scared me for a moment there. The idea that you would have an embassy.
Well, we would need to be a sovereign nation for that to happen.
I like that we're having this conversation again. And just to remind
Why
everyone,
precisely
can't
are
hear a thing.
Scottish taxpayers paying for the presence of a Scottish office in Canada?
Well, that was there's been a freedom of information request gone in about just that, so I'm waiting with bated breath.
I think
Yeah, what's to say that the person who runs that particular office is
Not Scottish.
Someone who wasn't unknown to the leadership of the Scottish National Party prior to receiving that job?
Well, maybe perhaps it's in Nova Scotia, so they were just preempting independence.
best laid plans and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Does anyone else have any silly stories or anything they'd like to discuss before we round off for the end?
No, I think you've beaten us to it with the April Fool's stories there. I don't think I can find anything that could top them, to be honest.
I really
No.
I really wish that I tell you what we should start doing is sort of a "Have I got news for you" roundup that I've prepared in advance for the end, so I could say, "And I leave you with news that," and then carry on like. But
You
no,
do your best Angus Deaton impression.
yes, before the whole
Or do
scandal thing.
are you actually old enough to remember Have I Got News for You with Angus Deaton?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have watched all of the ones on record. Anyway,
And it is sickening how the BBC kind of always insisted that, oh, it's much better now without him. No, it isn't. It was much better with him.
he was salty and he was dry, and he drove Paul Merton spare. That was the best bit of it. But on that note, it is time to end. So thank you very much to everyone in chat for joining us. And thank you very much to my guests. So thank you for coming on at such short notice, Undoomed, despite your technical issues. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Thank you for coming on Tailed Feature. A little bit late, but always a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on Discordia, despite your husband.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much for coming on, as always, Britisher.
Thank you very much, Mr. FBPE.
Just no. Good night, everybody, and have a great week. Take care.